Okay, good morning. So we pick up on 99A about about a dozen lines from the top by Reish Lakish. So the Mishnah has been talking about um, under what circumstances can a Kohen who is disqualified for some reason from, excuse me, from eating the carbon or from participating in the avoda, under what circumstances is he entitled to parts of the carbon the Kohanim can eat? By Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish asks, Baal mum v'hu. What if a Kohen has a mum, has a disqualifying blemish, and he's tame? Ma'oshi yichalkula. Should he be included in the distribution of the carbon of the meat? Since he's a Baal mum, he's not eligible for doing the avoda. V'rachman Arabie, but the Torah still says that he gets a share of the meat, so he can't do the avoda, but he can eat the meat. Lo shna, mali tame, mali balmum, and so he's also tame. Like, so what? The Torah said that this guy is a balmum, even though he's not eligible for the avoda, he can still participate in the distribution. So what does it matter if he's tummy? Or Dilma, or maybe Roy Lachila Cholek, Shana Roy Lachila Ela Cholek. Maybe like he's not only can't he participate in the avodah because he's tummy, he's a balmum, so he could eat from the carbon, but not if he's tummy, right? So maybe he's not eligible to eat it, so maybe he's not eligible for the distribution. Amar Rabba Tashma. Rabba brings a proof. Kohen Gadol Makrivana. A Kohen Gadol can bring karbanos when he is an onain. An onain is someone who's just experienced the death of a close relative and hasn't buried them yet. So Kohen Gadol, so typically an onain is off the hook for all mitzvahs, but a Kohen Gadol who's an onain, because he can't, like the reason for, I believe the reason that an onain is not does not participate in mitzvahs is because he has an overriding concern of looking after the burial of the relative. But a Kohen Gadol is not permitted to become tamei even to a close relative. So this Brisa says, he can do the avodah even when he's an onen. But he can't eat from the carbon. And he can't. He doesn't get a share to eat later after the burial. So we see that he's an onen. He can do the avoda, but he doesn't get to participate in the distribution. So must be because he can't eat from the carbon, right? He can do the avoda, but he can't eat from them. Therefore, maybe that's the reason. Seems like that's the reason that he can't get distribution of the meat. And so it looks like you have to be eligible to eat the meat in order to be part of the distribution. Shmamina, that's a good proof. So therefore, the same thing for a Kohen who is Balmum and Tame, since he's not eligible to eat, he's not eligible for distribution. Baraboshaya, Tame bekarbanos sibur. How about a Kohen who is Tame when a carbon sibur is offered? Ma'oshe chalkalo, should he get a piece of that? Mi'amrina hamachate amarachmana. The Torah says hakohen hamachateo sayachlana. The Kohen who does the avoda, who does the sprinkling of the blood, is the one who gets to eat it. V'hai name machatehu, and this Kohen, um, um, even though he's tame, he can he a carbon sibur, even if it's offered by a Kohen who is tame, is valid. Um, so maybe he should be included in distribution. So yes, he could have done the avoda, but he couldn't have eaten the meat while he's tame. So therefore, maybe he's not eligible for the distribution. Same proof. Kohen Gadol makrivana. The same brisa we saw before. Same rule. So we see that that in order to be eligible for distribution, you also have to be eligible to actually eat it. Shmamina, that's a good proof. Okay, next part of the Mishnah said, "Onen nogea ve'eno makrivin." Onen could touch the carbon, but he can't do the avoda. Onen nogea, is it true that Onen can touch the sacrifices? What's the problem? We'll see. Uraminu. Onen u'mechusar kippurim tzrichin tefillah lakodesh. An onen and someone who became tamei and still has to bring a korban as part of his tara process. Um, they until they complete the tefillah, they can't. Um, they it implies that they can't even touch the carbon. But our Mishnah says that no, they can't touch the carbon. So what's going on? Amar Rabbi Yami, Rabbi Yochanan, lo kasha, no problem. Kan b'shataval, kan b'shalotaval. Our Mishnah is talking about a kohen who already did tefillah, and he's a um, yeah, so he did feel already. Kan b'shelo tavel. See, the problem I should have mentioned. The problem with an onen is that even if he's not tamei, um, well, actually, we'll see this in the Gemara in a second. V'chi tavel my have. So what if he did tefillah, right? Hahadra ale aninus. He's still an onen, right? So the problem is you are if you're an onen, you're not eligible to touch the carbon. Why? If an onen does tefillah, goes to the mikvah, he's still an onen, right? Um, so my answer is lokasha hadasachdate hadlasachdate. Okay, what's the problem with an onen? Is like, why does he have to even go to the mikvah? Like, I understand if he was in contact with the dead body and he's tamei, so that's a different thing, right? That's not because he's an onen. That's because he actually became tamei. But the problem with an onen is, um, we can assume that in the process of caring for the burial, preparing for the burial, he may have become tamei. Now, what if a person says, "But I was focused on not becoming tamei the whole time"? So that's not a problem, or that's what we're suggesting. Is maybe that's not a problem. So if he had hesach hadas, if he was not focused on remaining tamei, we have to on remaining tahor. Excuse me. We assume that he became tamei, and he has to treat himself as if he's tamei, and therefore he can't touch the carbon. But the law safdate, but perhaps. Our Mishnah is when he says he was focused the whole time on remaining tahar. So then what's the problem, right? So that's why the Mishnah would say that he can do the avodah. So the Gemara answers, Hesech das shlishi ushvi by. Wait, you want to say that if he has Hesech hadas, that if he's wasn't focused on remaining tahor, then he just has to go to the mikvah. But no, he has to go through the entire purification ritual of 7 days with the paraduma and so on. He needs to have the water of the paraduma sprinkled on him on the third day and the seventh day of the process. So don't tell me that the problem that he can just go to the mikvah. That's not going to solve your Hesach Hadas problem. It's not going to solve your tumor problem. The Amar of Yostai Rabbi Masan Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yostai said, Hesach Hadas Sari Chazal Shri Shvi. He said that if you're an onen and you aren't focused on remaining tahar, then you have to treat yourself as fully, tamei mace and require the 7 day process. Versus lakasha, not a problem. Hadas achdate mitmei mace. What Rabbi Yisai was talking about when if you weren't focused on remaining tahor from a dead body. What we're talking about is um, yeah, you were focused on remaining tahor from a dead body, but you weren't being particularly focused on not touching a sheretz. Not touching a sheretz only requires going to the mikvah. So therefore, our Mishnah can say. Therefore, our Mishnah can say that you just have to go to the mikvah because the concern is too much sheretz. But the Gemara says, wait a minute, tamei sheretz tamei mal yahi. a Harav Shemesh by. So it's not true that you just need to go to the mikveh. You have to go to the mikveh and wait for nightfall for it to make sheretz. It's at least got that level of tuma. The Od and also afilu truma name. Um, so, so that if the Mishnah is talking about somebody who had Hesach Hadas from Tumas Sheretz, then it should also list that he can't eat truma um, until he goes to the mikvah. Rav Yirmiyah, so Rav Yirmiyah says, Biomer, that Mishnah is talking about Nishmarti midavar hamitameni. Velo nishmarti midavar haposleni. Yeah, what's the Hesach Hadas here? I was careful about becoming tame, but um, I wasn't careful about becoming puzzle. What does it mean by puzzle? It means a tuma drabanan. So I was focused on things that are really midoraisa, make me tame. So you don't have to worry that I need to go to the mikvah and wait for nightfall or do the 3 and 7 days. However, I wasn't so careful about Rabbanan things for which I would only require mikvah. So if I go to the mikvah, then I'm back to my old self. I'm eligible again to touch the karma. So Gemara says, "Umiika netirusa lapalga." Can you say such a thing? Can you say that I was careful about, this detail and not that detail? And yes, you can, Vatanya. As I'd say, this is not a question but a support. There's a brisa. Odehu hasal al rosha. If you have a basket of figs on your head, um, umagrefa besacho, and there's a shovel in the basket. V'amar libi al hasal ve'en libi al magrefa. Um, I was like protecting the. I was making sure that the figs did not become tame. I wasn't so careful about the shovel inside. So hasal tar magrefa tamea. Then the basket becomes tahar because you assume that he was protecting it from tuma, but the shovel um, is still a problem. Like if you weren't paying attention, maybe you or somebody else used the shovel and made it tummy. Um, so that we're trying to use as a half and half thing. That shows that that you can be careful about half of a thing and not the other half. Um, So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. The whole idea here, utatame magre falasal. If you're worried that the shovel is tame, then the rest of the basket should also become tame because it's in contact with it. So the Gemara is saying kli matame kli. No, one kli, the shovel can't be matame the basket. Utatame mabisocho. I'm not so worried about the basket. What about the figs? The shovel was in there with the figs. Marava, Ba'omer Shmartia Midavar Hamatama. We are saying that I protected the shovel from something that would make it tame. Velo Shmartia Midavar Apasla. And but I wasn't concerned. I wasn't paying attention for it to be not for it to be not to become tame durabanan. So this is the same thing that we're trying to show, that you can be careful about one detail of tuma, of a doraisa tuma, and not be careful, and at the same time not being careful about a drabanan tuma. So that seems to prove it. Igalgo milsa umatai lekame Rabbi Abba bar Mamal. This whole sugya, uh, kind of rolled along and eventually ended up in the base medrash of Rav Abba bar Mamal. Amar Lahu, he said, Lo shamiluhu ha diamar Rabbi Yochanan Amar. Uh, Amar Rabbi, didn't you hear what Rabbi Yochanan said? Ochel shlishi shel truma. If you eat a third degree tuma, so remember with tuma, there's like descending degrees of if an avha tuma contacts something else and that becomes a rishon latuma, if that contacts something else, it becomes a sheni latuma, and then there's also a concept of shlishi latuma that only applies to truma and kachim. Um, so if you eat this third degree tuma, a tame truma, asur lechol, you can't eat other truma, umutar liga, but you can touch other truma. So alma bachila avad rabbanon mala. So we see that, like, why would you be like, you can touch something else because you're not making it, you're not like the person can't make a other truma tame, but you still can't eat it. So we see that the rabbis were concerned about that, about eating benegil over bar. So um, so even though the rabbis said in our case that an onan can't eat the carbon before tefillah, he's still allowed to touch it. So there's no contradiction. Mishnah Chagiga is talking about eating. Our Mishnah is talking about touching, and we see that there is a source or a rationale to distinguish between those, and it's not contradictory. Okay, next thing in the Mishnah. Um, The Eino Cholik Lechol. The Onin doesn't get a share in the things that are being distributed for him to eat later that night when he becomes no longer an Onin. So, um, Miflach Hudulo Palik. So, so the Mishnah is saying that an Onin doesn't can't claim his share to eat later. But if other Kohanim invite him to, other Kohanim get shares, and then they invite him to dinner that night after he's no longer an Onin, Achel, so he can eat, right? So, um, so Onin can that doesn't seem to be a problem, right? The only problem is distributing it to him while he's still an onen, right? Or minhu, but I'll ask you a question. Tovel v'ochelos pischo. So onen, sorry, onen. Tovel v'ochelos pischo erev. Um, let's say a person is an onen on erev Pesach, so um, he can still eat. He can go to the mikvah, finish his aninus, and at night on Pesach he can eat the korban Pesach. Avalo b'kachim, but he can't eat other kachim. So we have so it seems like the Pesach is a little different than it's not like a distribution of a carbon of a carbon. It's more like this was your carbon. Um, so when the Mishnah says that other kachim the onen can't eat, um, even after he becomes an onen, it seems to be a contradiction to us. Like there's a difference between Pesach um, and other days of the year. For Pesach, I did Pesach nami kachim. Since on Pesach you're going to be allowed to eat the carbon Pesach, so we're going to be lenient and allow you to eat other kachim because it would be kind of self-contradictory. Um, um, but the other days of the year where there's no carbon Pesach, there's no matir, there's no situation where you can eat kachim at all. So we're not going to allow you to eat the other kachim. Um, umai. Umay avalo b'kachim. So why does our Mishnah say he can eat the Pesach but not other kachim? Avalo b'kachim shel kol hashana. So we thought the Mishnah meant you can't eat kachim on the night of Pesach, right? But no, that's not what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is saying on the night of Pesach you can eat Pesach and any other kachim, but you can't eat other kachim on other nights of the year in this situation. Ravasi has a different answer. Lo kasha kan shemes lomes biarbasar. In one case, in the Mishnah of Psachim, he became an onen on the 14th of Nisan. Ukavaro barbasar, and then you finished the kavur. You're no longer an onen. So on erev Pesach, there was a time in which you were no longer an onen. And so that's why you're eligible for the Pesach. Kan shemes lomes b'shlosha. But what about when you had your oh no, sorry. Um no. The in the case where you're the relative when he became an onin on the 14th, then you can't eat the kachim. But in the case when can you eat the kachim? Shemes lomes b'shloshasar. The day before Erev Pesach is when you became an onen. Ukavar b'asar, and then the burial took place on the 14th. Yom Kippur l'tafis leila midrabanan. So we're not that concerned because if you die, if the death had occurred on the 14th, then we're gonna kind of be concerned all day and have his status of an onen. But if the death took place on the 13th, and you did a lot of the preparations then, and only the burial was on the 14th, then we're not going to extend the Aninus to the following night. Because it's only Durabanan. Um, in other words, the aninus of the night following the day of the death is only drabanan. And Mantan aninus laila midrabanan. Who says that? Rabbi Shimon. Tanya, we have a brisa aninus laila midivrei Torah. Aninus of the night, meaning the night after the death, like that aninus is midaraisa. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Omer, onen eino midivrei Torah or midivrei Sofrim. That in that case, the onen at night is only drabanan. Teda, and how do I know? Shari Amru, Onen Tova B'Yochos Peaceful Erev, because of our very Mishnah. And Onen can go to the mikveh and eat his Pesach at night. Avalo b'kachim, but not other karbanos. So if it's doraisa, like why would you be allowed to eat the Pesach? Right? It must be, according to Rabbi Shimon, that it's only a drabanan thing, and that's why it's overridden by the Pesach. So Rabbi Shimon knew slightly Rabbanan. Do we really think that Rabbi Shimon holds that? Vatanya Rabbi Shimon Omer Onin Eno Mishaleach Korbanosov, and Onin can't send his send his korban with somebody else to be sacrificed when he's an Onin. My love afilu Pesach. So it's a general rule. So doesn't that also apply to Pesach? The Gemara says no. But Levar Pesach, no, it's only talking about non-Pesach things. Pesach is an exception and not covered by that rule when Rabbi Shimon says that. So in other words, Rabbi Shimon would say that an onen does bring the carbon Pesach.
Sure about
And
that
then he
though.
can eat it at night. Sorry?
Isn't there a general rule that a positive command from the Torah overrides a negative command from the Torah?
Um,
And that would satisfy the concern that this is a might be a deraita.
uh-huh. Um,
And not only that, but not eating the korban pesach is inner karet.
yeah. Um, Perhaps, I'm just speculating here, but perhaps like the mitzvah of well, there's a mitzvah to sacrifice the Pesach, right? I was going to say the mitzvah of eating the Pesach is at night when he's no longer an onen. Um, and anyway, yeah, that wouldn't answer the question. It's a great question.
Okay.
Um,
It is a little weird because the reason I give for requiring a chagiga offering
yeah,
um, is that you are going to be satiated when you eat korban pesach, and they're saying that you can't eat it. They're saying that you can't eat the chagiga offering.
right. Hmm. Okay,
So
good question. I don't know.
yeah,
Requires further research.
okay.
Um, okay, so now the Gemara brings another opinion of Rabbi Shimon that would shows that the onen does not bring the Pesach. The Vatanya, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Shlamim Kushu Shalem Mevi. A Shlamim is called Shlamim because you have to be Shalem. You have to be like complete, right? You have to be completely eligible when you bring it. And of course, a Pesach is an example of Shlamim. Veino Mevi Kishu Onen. So if you're an Onen, you can't bring it. Um, I mean, I Larabas is a Toda, and how do I know to include the Toda? Marvani is a Toda, Shekain Nechalos, Besimcha Kishlamim, because it is like the Shlamim in that um, you bring it on a holiday when you are happy because of the holiday. So in that sense, it is like the Shlamim. It's a little tenuous, but okay. Minayin Larabas Ola. What about including an Ola in this rule? Marban Yisa'ola Shekain Ba Beneder Ubinadava Kishlamim, because an Ola can be brought voluntarily like a Shlamim. Minayin L'Rabos Bechor Maser Pesach um Marvani b'chor maser Pesach she'kein einon boyin al chet. And how do I know to include b'chor maser and Pesach? Because like a shlamim, there's no sin involved in these. Um, Minayin l'rabos chasas v'yashem. What about including chatas and asham? Talmud lomar zevach, because the Torah calls them a zevach. Minayin and like a shlamim. Minayin l'rabos ha'ofos ha'menachos v'yayin v'aitzim v'alvona. What about all these other things? Bird offerings and flower offerings and wine and the wood and the incense. Talmud lomar shlamim karbano. Im zevach v'im zevach shlamim karbano. If so, literally, it's a simple statement. If his carbon is a shlamim, but by the juxtaposition of the words shlamim karbano, kol karbano shumevi kishu shalem mevi. So karbano, I mean any carbon has to be shalem, or in the sense that you have to be shalem when you bring it. Ve'eno mevi kishuan, and so that excludes an onin. Katani miya b'Pesach. Katani miya Pesach. So anyway, we included Pesach in all this. So doesn't that show that an onen can't bring a carbon Pesach? Doesn't that contradict Rabbi Shimon? And Rabbi Chisda, Pesach kedin asvei. Rabbi Shimon mentioned Pesach for no reason. So in other words, we're just kind of denying that Rabbi Shimon ever said this. So or he maybe it was a slip of the tongue or something like that. Like we're not taking seriously the statement that Rabbi Shimon included Pesach in the things you can't bring when you're an onen. Or Rosh Hashanah or Rav Sheshas, it's a pretty weak answer, but Rav Sheshas Amar, my Pesach, what does he mean? What does the Brisa mean when it says Pesach? Shalmei Pesach means the shlamim that come along with the Pesach, the Chagika that Charlie just mentioned a minute ago. Yehache, so Gemara says that's so Hainu Shlamim. So like you're repeating yourself. Like Chagiga is a Shlamim. So don't tell me that by saying Pesach you mean the Shlamim. It's already been stated. Atan Shlamim Haboin Machmas Pesach. When it says Shlamim and Pesach together, it means the Shlamim that come with the Pesach. In other words, the Chagiga. So in other words, there's two. It says them separately. Shlamim that come as independent shlamim offerings, and Pesach means shlamim that come along with the Pesach, the Chagika. Why do you have to mention that separately? So I would have thought I would have thought that okay, so I understand regular shlamim can't be brought by an onen, but a Pesach, since a Pesach can be brought by an onen, so maybe I would think that the Chagiga could also be brought by an onen. So Kamashma, so Shimon says no. He says both shlamim and Pesach, meaning shlamim that come with the Pesach, can't be brought by an onen, but still he says he would hold that that the Pesach itself can be brought by an onen. Rav Mari says Lokasha. No, he's answering it differently. Kan shemes lameis b'yudalad ukvar b'yudalad. Kan shemes lameis b'yudgimel ukvar b'yudalad. What we said before, there's a difference between if you became an onen on the 13th and buried him on the 14th. So then we're not so concerned about the carrying over the aninus to the night. But if the death and the burial occurred on the 14th, then we do carry over the aninus until the night. If the death occurred on the 14th and the burial was on the 14th, so then by Torah law, that the following night you still have the onen problem. With karbanos. But if he became an onen on the 13th and buried on the 14th, Yom Kippur midrabanan. The aninus of the 14th is only drabanan, and so enotofis lelo el midrabanan, and so it only extends to that night, not through Torah law, but obviously through rabbinic law. What about this brisa? Rabbi Shimon. The brisa that we had, Rabbi Shimon Teda Shari Onen Tovul V'Yocheles Pischo Avolo B'Kadshim. But the brisa we're discussing, Rabbi Shimon says specifically that the onen can can do tefillah and eat the Pesach, but not other kachim, right? So if you're saying that the Bryce is talking about the death on the 13th and the burial on the 14th, and the Aniyus is only Rabbanan, so the kachim wouldn't be a problem either. Namely, could have answered, Kamin alacha, no, Yamisa, Daraisa. Rabbi Yehuda could have said, no, I'm talking about when it's on the 14th. The death and the burial on the 14th, and it's a Daraisa thing that extends to the nighttime, so don't tell me about the 13th. You'd be talking about a different case. So Kasha, yeah, that's the problem. That answer is not a good answer. And we will stop here for today.
Got your clock.
All right, see you all tomorrow.
Last day today of Hanukkah.
Yes.